And welcome. My name is Taylor Fischer, and this is my architectural theory final for the spring term of 2026. Social Housing Reimagined. The importance of theory in architecture is that architectural theory allows us to explore architecture beyond the confines of the discipline, and it helps us to bridge the gap between design philosophy and practical construction. In my project today, I will be going over one of my past studio projects, which was low income housing in Boyle Heights, which is a sub area of Los Angeles. And I will be looking at it through the lens of slum theory, along with comparing it to Quinta Monroy, which is a social housing project that was constructed using slum theory and has been talked about throughout this course in slum theory, and also has just been a very good example of a forward thinking way to create social housing. Slum theory or slums are often referred to as disorganized living areas for the conventionally poor, but they have an organization and a hierarchy that allows them to function. Formed as a response to urbanism and modernity, the quote unquote slums were formed by people who were pushed out of the cities and were left with no other choice of where to live and little to their own devices. Slum theory frames these informal and self-built communities not just as poor, but as resilient, self-driven, and a direct challenge to the modern urban planning. My precedent analysis that I will be using today is Quinta Monroy by Alejandro Aravena. This housing project was very important for the area of Chile that it was built in. There was a group of about 100 families living on a 5,000 square meter lot, and they had been squatting on this lot for close to 30 years, a large majority of these people. And through some funding, they were able to, the developers and the architect were able to buy this lot and really look at how to maximize the sustainability and the square footage based on what they had prior. There were 100 families living here, and if they used single houses that had a bit more space, it just wasn't adding up, and they were only getting about 33 houses on this lot. But they looked at row houses and a lot of different studies, and then they went back to slum theory and the way that these houses were built prior and the infrastructure of this informal community had been designed. And by looking at that and really diving into what was needed, what were the basics that were needed, and what they could provide, they were able to fit 100 homes on this lot. They were each, um, the subsidies given were about $7,500 per house, and that included the partial purchase of the lot for each home. And with that budget, even with Chile's um, construction finances, it allowed for roughly 30 square meters of built space. So they decided to build half of a good home. And the half of a good home was building the absolute basics and leaving half of the structure unfinished and unbuilt, and allowing the citizens that were going to be living there to do a lot of the work themselves, giving them freedom and identity, and really creating these homes that had a lot of features from these self-built or quote unquote slum communities, but it gave them a way out of poverty by giving them actual tangible property that they could build equity in and later on sell. On the right here, I have a picture of the insides of the home before it was finished, and then what one family has done to finish out that home. And here we have an exterior view of one of the units and then what it looked like once it was built and finished by the residents, and it truly is amazing. This community has had some issues, just like any community, but for the most part, it has worked extremely well for housing this large amount of families in such small spaces and allowing them the freedom to grow and expand these homes by leaving them empty space to do so. My studio project is Soto Station. This was a project that I worked on last semester, so fall of 25, or yeah, fall of 25. And a lot of work went into this looking at the demographics of the community, what was needed in this community, precedent analysis studies, which for this project, I actually used Quinta Monroy as my precedent analysis. And I never really looked at it through the lens of slum theory until this term. And now when I look at this project through the lens of slum theory, I just really see that the community is not broken. We're here to aid in the development of it and not implement modernity and outcast the community members. Specifically in Boyle Heights, they face a lot of gentrification and pressures to conform. It was an area that was redlined and had a lot of trauma. The project roadmap for this was developing who was going to benefit from this project, site analysis, demographics, stakeholders in the project, developing a program, and then finally schematic design. The history was extremely important to focus on. The location, what was around it, the culture of this area, what the surrounding buildings looked like, what the people in this community really needed to help them grow and thrive without smothering them and making them feel like they had to conform just because there was low income housing being built. Um, this area of Los Angeles was redlined, and so for a long time it was extremely hard for anyone that lived there to get out of poverty because the home prices were extremely low and you couldn't get government financing through mortgages. I have my community takeaways. It was a transit-oriented community, a lot of public transportation, sustainability, multi-generational housing, and multiple housing typologies and layouts is what was really going to benefit this community. They are predominantly Hispanic and have Latino culture, which really fed into the multi-generational housing. It was very common in this area for 2 or 3 generations to live in a house together and have that large family dynamic. So once I addressed who I was designing for and what their needs were, and figured out a way that I could best bring this all together, I came up with multiple layouts that were flexible and that were small enough that they felt comfortable, but they also backed up to other units that they could be expanded into and shared a lot of walls and similar spaces, as we can see here. A lot of these areas back up to one another for or have a kind of duplex feel for that multi-generational use. In my conclusion, with revisiting this studio project, I believe aspects of slum theory were applied to this studio project without myself even being aware of it, just due to the wide nature of the current social housing movement and how we're really focusing on addressing the community needs. And I think a lot of architects are starting to do more community investment when they're doing this research instead of just building blanket buildings that are very blank. Um, Theory is important for the continued build of the world. We can learn about what works best and how to aid the root of a lot of these larger scale issues when we turn inwards to theory, specifically when it comes to the housing crisis. I think slum theory should be more widely known about as it gives dignity and humanity to the informal communities that are so often overlooked and forgotten. Even within our own communities, it's really easy to think less of or to overlook these spots just because they are lower income. But those are the people that need the most help, and those are the ones that we can have the largest impact on by really working with them and in their community using slum theory and other spatial awareness focused theories to really help build up these communities and give them steps to being moved out of poverty by giving them something that they can build equity in. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.